Camilla Rivera never expected her desperate plea for help to land her in a dangerous game with billionaire Nathaniel Sterling. What begins as a business arrangement spirals into a tangled web of love, betrayal, and buried family secrets. Can love survive when the truth comes to light? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Camilla Rivera stood in front of the mirror in the small bathroom of Joe's diner, trying to fix her messy ponytail after a long shift. Her uniform was stained with coffee and her feet hurt from running around for 8 hours straight. But none of that mattered compared to the hospital bill she held in her trembling hands. $100,000 for her mother's heart surgery. "I can't lose you, Mom," she whispered, wiping away a tear. At 28, Camilla had already been through more than most people face in a lifetime. She dropped out of college to care for her mother when she first got sick, working double shifts to keep them afloat. But this time, waiting tables and picking up extra hours wouldn't be enough. The door squeaked open, and Betty, another waitress who had worked at Joe's for 20 years, poked her head in. "You okay, honey?" "Table 6 is asking for more coffee." "I'm fine," Camilla said, quickly stuffing the bill into her pocket. But Betty wasn't fooled. The older woman had become like a second mother to her over the years. "Your mama's getting worse, isn't she?" Betty asked, her voice soft with concern. Camilla nodded, unable to speak. The doctors had been clear. Without the surgery, her mother had 6 months at most. She'd tried everything, loan applications, payment plans, even starting a fundraising page online. Nothing had worked. "Did you hear about that millionaire who moved back to town?" Betty said, reapplying her bright pink lipstick. "Nathaniel Sterling lives in that big mansion up on Hill Road. Mary from the pharmacy said he inherited some big company from his parents." Camilla barely listened as Betty continued gossiping about the mysterious rich man. She was too busy thinking about the latest rejection letter from the bank. But then something Betty said caught her attention. "They say he never leaves that house except for business. Probably lonely up there with all that money and nobody to share it with." That night after her shift ended, Camilla sat in her beat-up Toyota in the diner's parking lot, staring at her phone. She'd looked up everything she could find about Nathaniel Sterling. 40 years old, never married, CEO of Sterling Industries, worth millions, maybe billions, and completely alone. The idea that came to her made her stomach turn. It wasn't something she'd ever imagined herself doing. But when she thought about her mother lying in that hospital bed, getting weaker every day, she knew she had to try something. Anything. Say. Next morning, instead of going home after her shift, Camilla drove up Hill Road. The Sterling mansion loomed ahead, a huge stone house surrounded by iron gates. Her hands shook as she pressed the intercom button. "Yes?" a crisp voice answered. "My name is Camilla Rivera. I need to speak with Mr. Sterling. It's important." There was a long pause. "Mr. Sterling doesn't take unscheduled visitors." "Please," Camilla said, her voice cracking. "It's about a business proposition." Another pause, longer this time. Then, surprisingly, the gates began to open. The walk up the driveway felt like miles. Camilla's work shoes crunched on the gravel, and she wished she'd at least changed out of her waitress uniform. But there was no turning back now. A butler led her through the massive house to a study that was bigger than her entire apartment. Nathaniel Sterling sat behind a desk, not even looking up from his computer when she entered. He was handsome in a cold way, with sharp features and grey streaks in his dark hair. "Make it quick," he said, still not looking at her. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes." Camilla took a deep breath. "I want to make you an offer," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "I'll give you my body for $100,000. That got his attention. He looked up, his blue eyes finally meeting hers. For a moment, he just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed, a short, harsh sound that made her flinch. "Do you know how many women have tried to proposition me over the years?" he asked, standing up. "Though I must say none of them have been quite so direct." Camilla felt her face burn with shame, but she stood her ground. "This isn't about getting your money. My mother needs heart surgery. She'll die without it. I've tried everything else." Something in her voice made him pause. He studied her face, taking in her worn uniform, her tired eyes, the determination in her jaw. "Why should I believe you?" he asked, his voice softer now, curious rather than dismissive. "Because I have nothing left to lose," she answered honestly. "Except my mother." Nathaniel walked around his desk, leaning against it as he considered her. "Your offer is crude and inappropriate," he said finally. "But I have a counter-proposal." Camilla held her breath, waiting. 3 months, he said. "You'll spend 3 months as my companion, dinner, events, conversation. Nothing physical unless we both want it. In exchange, I'll pay for your mother's surgery." "Companion?" Camilla repeated, confused. "Like a friend. Like someone who makes me feel less alone," he corrected. "Do we have a deal?" Camilla looked into his eyes, cold and blue, and hiding something. That looked a lot like pain. She thought about her mother, about the beeping machines in the hospital, about the ticking clock of her life. "Yes," she said. "We have a deal." The first week of Camilla's arrangement with Nathaniel Sterling felt like walking on eggshells. She arrived at the mansion every evening after her shift at the diner, still trying to keep her regular job despite Nathaniel's disapproval. "You don't need to work there anymore," he said one evening as she rushed in, still wearing her uniform. "I've already paid for your mother's surgery." "I keep my promises," Camilla replied, heading to the guest room where she kept some nice clothes he'd bought her. "And I won't quit my job. This arrangement isn't forever." Nathaniel watched her climb the grand staircase, a slight frown on his face. He wasn't used to people saying no to him, especially not waitresses in coffee-stained uniforms. The surgery was scheduled for next month, and Camilla's mother, Maria, was already in the hospital under the care of the best doctors. When Camilla had told her about a friend who was helping with the medical bills, Maria had looked suspicious, but didn't ask questions. She was too tired, too sick to probe deeper. "Just be careful, mihija," Maria had whispered, squeezing her daughter's hand. "Rich men don't give money away for nothing." Those words echoed in Camilla's mind as she changed into an expensive blue dress for dinner. Every night she and Nathaniel ate together in the massive dining room. A butler served them fancy food she couldn't pronounce, and Nathaniel barely spoke except to correct her table manners. "The small fork is for salad," he said coldly, watching her fumble with the silverware. "Didn't anyone teach you proper etiquette?" "No," Camilla shot back, her temper flaring. "I was too busy learning how to pay bills and take care of my sick mother." For a moment, something like shame crossed Nathaniel's face, but it disappeared quickly behind his usual mask of indifference. The next day, Camilla found a book about dining, etiquette in her room. She stayed up late reading it, determined not to give him any more reasons to look down on her. Things started to change when Nathaniel took her to her first business dinner. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than 3 months' rent, and she'd practiced using the right forks all afternoon. "Remember," Nathaniel said as they pulled up to the restaurant in his expensive car, "you're an old friend from college who's recently moved back to town." "I didn't go to college," Camilla reminded him. "I dropped out to take care of my mother." Nathaniel turned to look at her, really look at her, for the first time that evening. "Why do you always do that?" "Do what?" "Tell the truth when a lie would be easier." Camilla met his gaze steadily. "Because lies hurt people. I've seen enough pain in my life. I don't need to cause more." Something shifted in Nathaniel's eyes, but before he could respond, the valet opened their door. The dinner was with James Patterson, one of Nathaniel's biggest business rivals. He was an older man with cold eyes who spent the whole evening trying to trip Nathaniel up, asking pointed questions about company policies and future plans. "And how do you know our Nathaniel?" Patterson asked Camilla, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. Before Nathaniel could jump in with their practiced lie, Camilla smiled. "I serve him coffee sometimes at Joe's Diner. Best pancakes in town." Patterson's eyebrows shot up, and Nathaniel nearly choked on his wine. But Camilla kept talking, telling funny stories about the diner, about the regulars who came in every day, about the time she accidentally served decaf to a truck driver who'd fallen asleep in his food. By the end of the dinner, Patterson was laughing, and even Nathaniel had cracked a few smiles. "That was unexpected," Nathaniel said on the drive home. "But not terrible." "Was that almost a compliment?" Camilla teased. "Better be careful, Mr. Sterling. People might think you're going soft." To her surprise, he actually chuckled, a real laugh, not his usual sarcastic one. After that night, things began to change between them. Nathaniel still corrected her manners, but his tone was less harsh. Sometimes he even explained why certain rules existed, turning their dinners into casual lessons about the world he lived in. In return, Camilla started telling him about her world, about regular people with regular problems, about the kindness of strangers, about finding joy in small things. "You really love working at that diner, don't you?" he asked one evening, watching her talk about Betty's latest drama with the cook. "I love the people," Camilla corrected. "They're like family." "Family," Nathaniel repeated quietly, staring into his wine glass. "I wouldn't know much about that." It was the first personal thing he'd shared with her, and Camilla knew better than to push. But later that night, as she lay in her luxurious guest room, she thought about the loneliness she sometimes saw in his eyes. Maybe that's why he'd made this strange arrangement, not because he needed a companion for show, but because he needed someone to remind him that he was human. The next morning, she brought him coffee from Joe's diner. He complained about it being inferior to his imported beans, but she noticed he drank every drop. 1 month into their arrangement, Camilla realized something that scared her. She was starting to care about what Nathaniel thought, not about his money or his status, but about his rare smiles, his hidden pain, the way he pretended not to watch her when she talked to his staff like they were old friends. "You're changing him," the head housekeeper, Mrs. Thompson, told her one day. "He actually said please yesterday, nearly gave me a heart attack." But Camilla knew the truth was more complicated. She wasn't changing Nathaniel. She was just the first person in a long time who cared enough to see past his walls. The night everything changed started like any other. Camilla was setting the table for dinner. She'd insisted on doing it herself. After learning all the proper placements, when she heard shouting from Nathaniel's study, "You had no right," Nathaniel's voice boomed through the hallway. Camilla had never heard him raise his voice before. The study door burst open, and a tall man in an expensive suit stormed out. He looked enough like Nathaniel to be his brother, the same sharp features but with colder eyes. "I had every right, little brother," the man sneered, then noticed Camilla standing there. "Oh, is this your latest companion? At least this one's prettier than the last." Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, his face red with anger. "Get out, Victor. Now." After Victor left, Nathaniel locked himself in his study. He didn't come to dinner that night, or the next night, or the night after that. "Should we be worried?" Camilla asked Mrs. Thompson, watching another untouched meal being cleared away. The housekeeper sighed. "Victor Sterling always brings out the worst in him. Their parents' death hit them both hard, but they handled it differently. Victor got mean. Nathaniel just shut down." "What happened to their parents?" "Car accident 10 years ago. Nathaniel was supposed to be driving them to the airport that day, but he was running late at work. They took a taxi instead. The driver fell asleep at the wheel." Camilla's heart ached. "He blames himself. Hasn't forgiven himself since," Mrs. Thompson confirmed. "And Victor never lets him forget it." That night, instead of going to her room after dinner, Camilla knocked on Nathaniel's study door. No answer. She knocked again. "Go away," came his muffled voice. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not leaving until you eat something." Silence. Then, surprisingly, the door clicked open. Nathaniel sat behind his desk, looking worse than she'd ever seen him. His usually perfect hair was messy, his tie loose, empty whiskey glasses scattered around. "Him. Why are you here, Camilla?" he asked tiredly. "It's not part of our arrangement to deal with my personal problems." "Maybe I care about more than just our arrangement," she said, setting down the plate of food she'd brought. "And maybe you need to stop punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault." His head snapped up. "You don't know anything about it." "I know about guilt," Camilla said quietly. "When my dad left us, I thought it was my fault. I was 12 and I spent years thinking if I'd been a better daughter, he would have stayed." "That's different," Nathaniel muttered. But he was listening. "Now, is it? We were both kids blaming ourselves for things we couldn't control." She moved closer, perching on the edge of his desk. "The difference is, I learned to let it go. You're still carrying it around like a shield, pushing everyone away. So you don't have to risk losing them too. Like you're one to talk about pushing people away, he shot back. You won't even tell your mother about our arrangement. Because I'm protecting her, Camilla said. You're just protecting yourself. Nathaniel stood up suddenly, walking to the window. My brother's trying to take control of the company, he said after a long moment. He says I'm not fit to run it, that I'm too soft, too much like our father. Was your father soft? He was kind, Nathaniel said softly. He cared more about his employees than profits. Victor hated that about him. I used to hate it too. I thought it made him weak. And now I wonder if he was the strongest of us all. He turned to look at her. Do you know what he told me the last time I saw him? He said, success means nothing if you're too afraid to let people in. I was so angry at him for saying that. And then he died and I never got to tell him he was right. Camilla stood up, walking over to him. Without thinking, she took his hand. To her surprise, he didn't pull away. Tell him now, she said. Live the way he wanted you to. That's better than any apology. Nathaniel looked down at their joined hands. Why do you care so much? This isn't real, remember? It's just an arrangement. Maybe it started that way, Camilla said. But nothing about this feels fake anymore. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air between them crackled with something neither was ready to name. Then Nathaniel cleared his throat and stepped back. Your mother's surgery is tomorrow, he said, changing the subject. You should get some rest. Camilla nodded, heading for the door, but she paused before leaving. For what it's worth, she said, I think your father would be proud of who you're becoming. After she left, Nathaniel stood at the window for a long time, thinking about his father's words and the warmth of Camilla's hand in his. For the first time in years, the weight of guilt in his chest felt a little lighter. The next morning, a large donation was made to the hospital's charity program in his father's name. When Camilla saw the news, she smiled, knowing Nathaniel had taken the first step toward healing. But as she headed to the hospital for her mother's surgery, neither of them realized that Victor Sterling was already putting plans in motion that would test their growing connection in ways they never expected. The morning of Maria's surgery, Camilla paced the hospital waiting room, her hands shaking as she held her third cup of coffee. Betty from the diner had come to support her, bringing sandwiches that Camilla couldn't eat. She's strong, honey, Betty said, patting the seat next to her. Your mama's a fighter. Camilla nodded, but couldn't sit down. Her mind kept racing with worst-case scenarios. The surgery would take 6 hours and every minute felt like torture. To everyone's surprise, Nathaniel Sterling walked into the waiting room at hour 2. He looked out of place in his expensive suit, carrying a paper cup of coffee from Joe's diner. I thought you had a board meeting, Camilla said when he handed her the coffee. I did, he replied simply. This was more important. Betty's eyebrows shot up as she watched their interaction, but she didn't say anything. She just smiled knowingly and pretended to read her magazine. Meanwhile, across town at Sterling Industries, Victor Sterling sat at the head of the boardroom table, a smug smile on his face. As you can see, he told the board members, my brother's priorities have clearly shifted. He's missing crucial meetings to spend time with a waitress. Is this really the kind of leadership our company needs? Nathaniel's numbers are better than ever, argued Sarah Chen, the CFO who'd worked with their father for 20 years. The charity initiatives have improved our public image, and employee satisfaction is at an all-time high. We're not running a charity, Victor snapped. We're running a business and my brother is weak just like our father was. Back at the hospital, hour 4 of the surgery brought unexpected complications. Dr. Roberts came out to the waiting room, still in his surgical scrubs. Mrs. Rivera's heart is weaker than we expected, he explained gently. We need to perform an additional procedure. It will extend the surgery by several hours. Camilla felt her knees give out. Nathaniel caught her before she could fall, helping her into a chair. Will she? Camilla couldn't finish the question. We're doing everything we can, Dr. Roberts assured her. The good news is that we have access to some very advanced equipment thanks to a recent donation. He glanced meaningfully at Nathaniel before heading back to surgery. I can't lose her, Camilla whispered, tears finally spilling over. She's all I have. Without hesitation, Nathaniel took her hand. "That's not true anymore," he said quietly. Betty suddenly became very interested in the vending machine across the room, giving them privacy. Hours passed. Nathaniel's phone kept buzzing with messages, but he ignored them all. Instead, he listened as Camilla told stories about growing up with Maria, how she'd worked 3 jobs to send Camilla to a good school, how she'd taught Camilla to make tamales, using her grandmother's recipe, how she never complained even when things were at their hardest. "She sounds like an amazing woman," Nathaniel said. "She is," Camilla agreed. "She taught me that real strength isn't about power or money, it's about love." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "My father used to say something similar. I never understood it until—" He paused, looking at their still joined hands. Just then his phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed Sarah Chen's name. "You should take it," Camilla said. "It might be important." Nathaniel stepped into the hallway to answer. When he came back, his face was grim. "Victor's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning," he said. "He's trying to have me removed as CEO." "What? He can't do that." "He can, if he convinces. Enough board members I'm unfit to lead." Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair. "The meeting's at 8 tomorrow. I need to prepare." "Then go," Camilla said firmly. "I'll be okay here." Nathaniel hesitated. "I don't want to leave you alone." "She's not alone," Betty chimed in. "I've got her. You go deal with that snake of a brother." Before leaving, Nathaniel did something that shocked them both. He kissed Camilla's forehead. "Call me as soon as there's news," he said softly. After he left, Betty let out a low whistle. "Well, honey, I don't know what kind of arrangement you two have, but that man is in love with you." Camilla touched her forehead where his lips had been. "It's complicated," she said. "Love always is," Betty replied wisely, "but it's worth it." At midnight, Dr. Roberts finally emerged again. Camilla held her breath as he approached, but then she saw his smile. "The surgery was successful," he announced. "Your mother is stable and responding well. She's very lucky. Without that new equipment, the complications might have been too much." Camilla burst into tears of relief. Through her blurred vision, she pulled out her phone to call Nathaniel. But before she could dial, she saw breaking news on the TV in the waiting room. Sterling Industries in crisis. CEO Nathaniel Sterling faces accusations of mismanaging company funds. The image showed Victor Sterling speaking to reporters, looking appropriately concerned as he discussed his difficult decision to protect the company's interests. Camilla's heart dropped. While Nathaniel had been here supporting her, his brother had been plotting his downfall. "Oh, honey," Betty said, seeing the news. "Sometimes doing the right thing comes with a price. Then I have to help him fight," Camilla declared, already dialing his number, because that's what her mother had taught her. You stand by the people you love, no matter what it costs. The morning of the board meeting dawned cold and grey. Nathaniel stood in his office at Sterling Industries, staring out the window at the city below. His phone buzzed with a text from Camilla. "Mom's awake and stable. Go show them what you're made of." A small smile crossed his face, but it disappeared when his secretary rushed in. "Sir, they're ready for you in the boardroom." The long mahogany table was full when Nathaniel entered. Victor sat at the far end, a folder of papers in front of him and a smug smile on his face. The board members wouldn't meet Nathaniel's eyes. "Let's get this over with," Victor said, standing up. "As you can all see from the documents I've provided, my brother has been making questionable decisions with company funds." He clicked a remote, and images appeared on the screen behind him. Newspaper clippings about hospital donations, charity programs, employee benefit increases. In the past 3 months alone, he's given away millions that should have gone to our shareholders. And why? Victor's eyes narrowed. "Because he's been distracted by a waitress," murmurs filled the room. Nathaniel's hands clenched into fists. "Leave her out of this," he warned. "Oh, but she's central to all of this," Victor continued. "While you've been playing house with your little gold digger, I've been protecting our family's legacy." Sarah Chen, the CFO, stood up. "If I may," she said, pulling out her own folder. "I have some numbers to share." Victor waved his hand dismissively. "We've all seen the charity expenses." "No," Sarah interrupted. "You haven't seen the whole picture. She started passing out papers. Since Nathaniel took over as CEO, our overall profits are up 40%. Employee retention has increased by 60%. Our public approval rating is the highest it's been in company history. She turned to face the board. Yes, we're spending more on charitable causes, but we're making more too. Happy employees work harder. Good publicity brings in customers. Nathaniel isn't running this company like his father. He's running it better. Victor's face turned red. This is ridiculous. Are we really going to let sentiment? The boardroom door burst open. Camilla stood there, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her hair messy from sleeping in the hospital chair. Sorry I'm late, she said, walking straight to the front of the room. But I thought you should all hear the truth about Victor Sterling before you make any decisions. Security, Victor called, but no one moved. 2 days ago, Camilla continued, Victor offered me $5 million to break Nathaniel's heart publicly. He wanted me to tell the press I was just using him for his money. She pulled out her phone and pressed play on a recording. Victor's voice filled the room. Just say he meant nothing to you, that it was all about the money. With him emotionally compromised, the board will have to remove him. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Victor lunged for the phone, but Sarah Chen stepped between them. You set me up, Victor snarled at Camilla. No, she replied calmly. You did that yourself. I just learned from my time here that it's always good to record important business meetings. She looked at Nathaniel, who was staring at her with a mixture of shock and something else, something that made her heart race. Is this true? One of the board members asked Victor. Did you try to manipulate company leadership by attacking your own brother? Victor's composure finally cracked. He's weak, just like our father was weak. This company needs a strong leader. Your father? Nathaniel's voice cut through his brother's shouting. Built this company on trust and compassion. I used to think that made him weak too, but I was wrong. He walked over to stand beside Camilla. Real strength isn't about pushing people away or destroying them to get ahead. It's about lifting them up, building something together. The board voted unanimously to keep Nathaniel as CEO. They also voted to launch an investigation into Victor's activities over the past year. As security escorted a raging Victor from the building, he turned back to Camilla. You think you've won? You're nothing but a waitress playing dress-up in our world. You're right, she said. I'm a waitress. I serve people every day who work harder than you've ever worked in your life, and I'm proud of that. After everyone left, Nathaniel and Camilla stood alone in the boardroom. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. Coming here exposing Victor, it could have backfired? Yes, I did, she replied. Because that's what you do for people you... She stopped, suddenly unsure. For people you what? Nathaniel stepped closer. For people you love, she whispered. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Nathaniel reached out, touching her cheek gently. When Victor offered you that money, he said, did you ever consider taking it? Not for a second, she answered. Honestly, money can't buy what I really want. And what's that? You, she said simply. Just you. Not your wealth or your status. Just the man who sits with me in hospital waiting rooms and drinks cheap diner coffee and is finally learning to let love in again. Nathaniel pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. Our arrangement ended the moment you walked into this boardroom, he murmured. So what happens now? Now, Camilla said, smiling up at him, we write our own story. But as they left the building together, neither noticed Victor watching from his car across the street, his face dark with rage. The battle might have been won, but the war was far from over. Maria Rivera opened her eyes to find her daughter asleep in the hospital chair beside her bed, still wearing the clothes from yesterday. On the bedside table sat a fresh bouquet of roses and a cup of coffee from Joe's diner. Camilla, Maria called softly, her voice still weak from the surgery. Mija, wake up. Camilla stirred, immediately alert. Mom, how are you feeling? Do you need anything? Should I call the nurse? I need you to tell me the truth, Maria said, looking at her daughter carefully. Who is he? Who? Maria gestured to the flowers. The man who paid for my surgery. The one who brings you coffee every morning and makes you smile at your phone when you think I'm sleeping. Camilla hesitated, but she was tired of secrets. His name is Nathaniel Sterling, the millionaire, Maria's eyes widened. "Mija, what have you gotten yourself into?" Before Camilla could answer, Nathaniel appeared in the doorway. He'd changed from his business suit into more casual clothes, though his idea of casual still probably cost more than Camilla's monthly rent. "Mrs. Rivera," he said politely, "it's good to see you awake." Maria studied him with a mother's keen eye. "So you're the man who saved my life?" "No," Nathaniel replied, surprising them both. "Your daughter did that. I just helped with the paperwork." Something in Maria's face softened, but before she could respond, a nurse rushed in with the morning newspaper. "Miss Rivera," she said frantically, "you need to see this." The headline made Camilla's blood run cold. "Sterling Scandal. CEO's secret affair with waitress exposed." The article was full of twisted half-truths and outright lies. Someone, clearly Victor, had leaked details about their arrangement to the press, making it sound tawdry and calculated. There were even photos of Camilla entering and leaving the mansion at various hours. "They're calling me a gold digger," Camilla whispered, scanning the article. "They're saying I seduced you to get money for Mom's surgery." "It's garbage," Nathaniel said firmly. "No one who knows you would believe it." But the damage was already spreading. Camilla's phone started buzzing with messages from the diner. Someone had plastered copies of the article all over the windows. Customers were leaving nasty comments on their social media page. "Betty says I should stay away for a few days," Camilla said, reading the texts, "until things calm down." "This is my fault," Nathaniel began, but Maria interrupted him. "No," she said strongly, "this is the fault of whoever's trying to hurt you both." She looked between them, seeing what they themselves were only beginning to understand. Love makes people targets sometimes. The question is, are you strong enough to fight for it? Just then, Sarah Chen called Nathaniel. After a brief conversation, his face turned grim. "Victor's gone to the tabloids," he reported. "He's claiming I embezzled company funds to support my lifestyle with Camilla. There's going to be an official investigation." "Can he do that?" Camilla asked. "He can try." Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair. "But he's not just attacking me anymore. He's trying to destroy your reputation too." "Let him try," Camilla said fiercely. "I've got nothing to hide." But later that day, when she went home to change clothes, she found her apartment had been broken into. Nothing was stolen, but her mother's old recipe box containing family photos and precious memories was missing. Her phone rang. Victor's number. "Amazing what you can find in people's past," his smooth voice said when she answered. "Old photos, letters, secrets. What do you want?" "Break up with my brother. Publicly. Tell everyone you were using him. Do it, or every skeleton in your family's closet goes public." Camilla's hand tightened on the phone. "You don't know anything about my family." "No?" Victor's voice turned cruel. "Does Nathaniel know about your father? About why he really left? About what happened to all that money?" Camilla's heart stopped. How had he found out? "You have 24 hours, Victor said. "Break his heart or I'll destroy everything you care about." When Nathaniel found her an hour later, she was sitting on her apartment floor, surrounded by scattered papers. "Camilla," he knelt beside her. "What happened?" She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "There's something I need to tell you about. My father. About who I really am." "You're the woman I love," Nathaniel said simply. "Nothing else matters." "This will," she whispered. "This will change everything." Camilla's hands shook as she pulled an old newspaper clipping from her father's papers. The headline read, "Local bank manager disappears with $2 million in client funds." "My father wasn't just a man who abandoned his family," she said quietly. "He was a thief. He stole people's life savings, their homes, their futures, everything." Nathaniel sat beside her on the floor reading the article. The photo showed a younger version of Maria, with 12-year-old Camilla, standing outside their old house as the police conducted their investigation. "We lost everything," Camilla continued. "The house, our savings, even our good name. People in town treated us like we were criminals too, like we must have known what he was doing." "But you were just a child," Nathaniel said softly. "Try telling That to the angry mob that threw rocks through our windows. Camilla wiped away a tear. Mum worked so hard to rebuild our lives, to give me a normal childhood, but the shame never really went away. That's why we moved here, where nobody knew our story. She looked at Nathaniel, her eyes full of fear. Victor found the old records. He's threatening to expose everything, to tell everyone that I'm the daughter of a criminal. Your company's stock will plummet if people think you're involved with someone like me. Let him, Nathaniel started to say, but Camilla stood up suddenly. You don't understand, she began pacing. The money my father stole, it was never found. Victor's going to make it look like I'm following in my father's footsteps, like I seduced you to get close to your money, just like my father gained people's trust before he betrayed them. Nathaniel got up and caught her hands, stopping her nervous movement. Camilla, look at me. I don't care about any of this. You should. Your reputation, your company, can survive a scandal, but I can't lose you. Just then, Nathaniel's phone buzzed. It was Sarah Chen. When he answered, her voice was urgent. Turn. On the news now. They flipped on the small TV in Camilla's apartment. Victor's face filled the screen, standing at a press podium. It pains me to reveal this, he was saying, his face a mask of false concern. But the public needs to know the truth. Camilla Rivera isn't just a waitress who seduced my brother. She's the daughter of the infamous Martin Rivera, who stole millions before disappearing. And now suddenly, large sums of money are being moved through Sterling Industries accounts. That lying snake, Nathaniel growled. He's the one who's been embezzling funds. He's trying to frame you for his crimes. Camilla sank onto her worn couch, her face pale. It's happening all over again. Everyone will think I'm just like him. Her phone started ringing, reporters, old acquaintances, even Betty from the diner, asking if it was true. She turned it off, unable to face them. But then there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, she found Maria, there in a wheelchair, accompanied by a nurse. Mama, you should be in the hospital. I saw the news, Maria said firmly, and I couldn't let you face this alone, not again. She wheeled herself into the apartment, then pulled an old envelope from her robe pocket. I've been waiting for the right time to show you this, she said, handing it to Camilla. Your father sent it to me 5 years ago before he died. Died? Camilla whispered. This was news to her. Cancer, Maria explained. He was living under a false name in Mexico. When he knew he was dying, he wrote this confession. Read it. With trembling fingers, Camilla opened the letter. As she read, tears began falling onto the paper. He says he never spent the money, she said in disbelief. He gave it to a man named Thomas Sterling to invest, but Thomas betrayed him and kept it all. Thomas Sterling. Nathaniel's face went white. Thomas Sterling was my uncle, Victor's mentor. He died in a boating accident 5 years ago. The letter says he has proof, Camilla continued reading. Bank records, recordings of their meetings, everything. He hid it all in a safety deposit box at the old bank, under Mom's maiden name. Nathaniel was already on the phone with Sarah Chen. We need to get to that bank before Victor figures this out. If we can prove his uncle was involved in the original theft, then we can expose his whole house of cards, Sarah finished. I'm on my way. Camilla looked at her mother. Why didn't you tell me about the letter? Because you were finally happy, Maria said softly. You had built a life without the weight of his sins. I didn't want to burden you, but now... She looked at Nathaniel. Now you have someone strong enough to help you carry it. Nathaniel took Camilla's hand. We'll face this together. Whatever we find in that safety deposit box, whatever Victor throws at us, we'll handle it as a family. The word family hung in the air, full of promise and healing. For the first time since the scandal broke, Camilla felt hope. But as they prepared to leave for the bank, none of them noticed the black car parked across the street or the man inside it making a very important phone call. They're going to the bank, Victor said into his phone. Yes, right now, you know what to do. Whatever it takes, that safety deposit box cannot be opened. The First National Bank looked exactly as Camilla remembered it from her childhood. The same marble columns, the same heavy wooden doors, even the same security guard, though his hair had gone completely grey now. Miss Rivera? The guard's eyes widened in recognition. Little Camilla? Hello, Mr. Johnson, she said softly. It's been a long time. The old guard's face softened. Too long. I never believed your father. Well, it doesn't matter now. He looked at Nathaniel, then back at Camilla. I've been seeing you two on the news. Then you know why we're here, Nathaniel said. We need access to a safety deposit box under Maria Gonzalez's name. Mr. Johnson checked his computer. I'm sorry, but someone already came asking about that box an hour ago. Said they were from Sterling Industries' legal team. Camilla's heart sank. Victor, I told them the same thing I'll tell you, Mr. Johnson continued. That box hasn't been opened in 15 years, and it can only be accessed with 2 keys, one held by the bank and one by the owner. Hope flared in Camilla's chest. She pulled out her mother's old keyring, with the small gold key she'd always wondered about. Just then, Sarah Chen burst through the doors. Victor's on his way, she said breathlessly. He's got a court order to seize the contents of the box. How long do we have? Nathaniel asked. 20 minutes, maybe less. Mr. Johnson looked between them, then made a decision. Follow me, he said, leading them quickly to the vault. Whatever's in that box, your father wanted you to have it, Camilla. Not them. The vault was cold and quiet, walls lined with metal, boxes. Mr. Johnson found the right one and used his key. Camilla's hands shook as she inserted her mother's key and turned it. Inside, they found a thick envelope and an old cell phone. It's one of those old recording devices disguised as a phone, Sarah said, examining it. They used these for undercover work in the 90s. Nathaniel was reading the documents. These are transfer records, he said. Your father didn't steal the money. He was investigating Thomas Sterling for embezzlement. He found out Thomas was stealing from the bank and using your father's access codes to do it. But why didn't he go to the police? Camilla asked. Because of this. Nathaniel held up a photograph. It showed Thomas Sterling meeting with several men whose faces Camilla recognized from old mob movies. Thomas was laundering money for organized crime, Sarah realized, through the bank and later through Sterling Industries. And Victor's been continuing his uncle's work, Nathaniel said grimly. That's where all the missing company funds have been going. They heard commotion upstairs. Victor's voice echoed through the building. We're here to execute a court order. That safety deposit box belongs to Sterling Industries. Quick, Mr. Johnson said. There's a back exit through the employee area. But, as they turned to leave, Victor appeared at the vault entrance, flanked by 2 armed men who definitely weren't lawyers. Well, isn't this cozy? Victor sneered. The waitress, the Bleeding Heart CEO, and the loyal CFO. Did you really think I wouldn't figure out where the proof was hidden? It's over, Victor, Nathaniel said. We know everything. About Uncle Thomas, about the money laundering. All of... Dinner? Over? Victor laughed. Brother, it's only just beginning. Those men Thomas worked with, they're still around, and they don't like loose ends. One of the armed men stepped forward, reaching for the envelope in Nathaniel's hands. But suddenly, the vault was flooded with light, as dozens of FBI agents poured in. Actually, Sarah said calmly, those men are in federal custody as we speak. She pulled out a badge. I've been working undercover with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit for 2 years, building a case against your operation. Victor lunged for the exit, but was quickly tackled by agents. As he was being handcuffed, he glared at Camilla. You, he spat. This is all your fault. You and your criminal father. My father, Camilla said firmly, was a hero who died trying to expose your uncle's crimes. And now, finally, everyone will know the truth. Later, as reporters swarmed outside the bank, Nathaniel pulled Camilla aside into a quiet corner. I should have seen what Victor was doing, he said. All these years, he's been using our family's company to continue Uncle Thomas's criminal empire. We both had fathers who died carrying heavy secrets, Camilla replied. But now we can make things right. Nathaniel took her hands in his. Marry me, Camilla blinked, startled by the sudden proposal. What? I know it's fast, and maybe it's crazy, but I don't care. These past months have taught me that life is too short to waste time being afraid. I love you, Camilla Rivera. Marry me. Before she could answer, they were interrupted by a commotion outside. Through the bank's windows, they could see Victor being led to a police car, but the look he gave them was not of a defeated man. This isn't over, Sarah warned, joining them. Victor's partners won't take this quietly. They're going to come after all of us. Camilla squeezed Nathaniel's hand. Then we'll face them together. She turned to him with a smile. And yes, I'll marry you. But as they emerged from the bank into a sea of flashing cameras, none of them noticed the red dot of a laser sight briefly appearing on Nathaniel's chest, then disappearing into the chaos of the crowd. The next morning's headlines told the whole story. Sterling Industries. Scandal. CEO's brother arrested in mob connection. Below that was a smaller headline that made Camilla smile. Waitress's father vindicated. Martin Rivera was a hero. Maria cried when she read the article clearing her husband's name. She was back in the hospital for post-surgery care, but her room was filled with flowers from people apologizing for how they treated her family all those years ago. Your father can rest in peace now, she told Camilla, holding her daughter's hand. Then she noticed the ring. And you? You're sure about this engagement? More sure than I've ever been about anything, Camilla replied. But their moment of peace was shattered when Nathaniel burst into the room, his face pale. We need to go, he said urgently. Now. The FBI just found a hit list in Victor's office. Both your names are on it. What about my mother? Camilla asked, panic rising in her throat. All ready. Arranged, Sarah Chen said, entering with 2 FBI agents. Mrs. Rivera will be moved to a secure medical facility, and you two are going into protective custody until we can round up the rest of Victor's organization. I'm not hiding, Nathaniel argued. The company needs me right now. The company needs you alive, Sarah countered. Victor might be in custody, but his mob connections are still out there, and they're not happy about losing their money laundering operation. As if to prove her point, gunshots suddenly exploded through the hospital window. Nathaniel pulled Camilla down as glass shattered around them. The FBI agents rushed to the window, returning fire at a black SUV speeding away. That wasn't a hit, Sarah said grimly, checking that everyone was okay. That was a warning. Next time they won't miss. Within hours, Camilla and Nathaniel were moved to a safe house outside the city. It was a small cottage in the woods, nothing like the luxury Nathaniel was used to. But as they sat together that night, watching the sunset from the porch, he seemed more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. What are you thinking about? Camilla asked, curled up beside him. About how strange life is, he replied. A few months ago I was alone in that big house, thinking I had everything figured out. Now I'm in hiding with a waitress who turned my whole world upside down. Having second thoughts? He pulled her closer. Only about why it took me so long to find you. Inside the cottage, the TV droned with news about Victor's arrest. The reporter was saying something about his lawyer, claiming he had evidence that would shock the nation. What do you think he means by that? Camilla wondered. Before Nathaniel could answer, the power went out. They heard branches cracking in the woods around them. Get inside, Nathaniel whispered. Now. They barely made it through the door when the first bullet hit the porch where they'd been sitting. The FBI agents stationed outside returned fire. As Nathaniel and Camilla raced to the panic room Sarah had shown them earlier. This is my fault, Camilla said as they huddled in the darkness. If you'd never met me? If I'd never met you, I'd still be that cold, lonely man in his mansion, Nathaniel interrupted. Victor and his crimes would still be poisoning the company. At least now we're fighting for something real. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. Package from Victor delivered to press, going public tomorrow morning. You need to see this. She sent a video file. In it, Victor sat in his prison cell, smiling at the camera. You think you've won? He said. Tomorrow everyone will know the truth about Thomas Sterling's death, about who really killed him on that boat. Right, brother? Camilla turned to Nathaniel. His face had gone white. What is he talking about? The boating accident, Nathaniel said quietly. It wasn't an accident, I was there. I saw Uncle Thomas talking on the phone about my father's death, about how he'd arranged it all. The car accident that killed our parents. It wasn't the taxi. Driver's fault. Thomas had the brakes cut. What did you do? Camilla asked softly. What any son would do, he replied, his voice breaking. I confronted him, we fought, he fell and I could have saved him, but I didn't. Gunfire outside had stopped. They heard Sarah calling the all clear. We caught 2 of them, she reported when they emerged. But there will be more. And tomorrow when this story breaks, then we'll face it, Camilla said firmly. Together. No, Nathaniel said, stepping away from her. I can't ask you to defend a murderer. You're not a murderer. You're a son who found out his uncle killed his parents. There isn't a jury in the world that would convict you. The press will crucify the company. The stock will crash. Everything my father built can be rebuilt, Camilla finished, but only if you stop carrying these secrets alone. She took his hand. You taught me that love means facing the hard things together, so let me face this with you. Tears filled Nathaniel's eyes as he pulled her close. Outside, they could hear helicopters approaching, more FBI agents coming to secure the area. Tomorrow, the world would know everything. But for now, in this moment, they held on to each other in the darkness, two people who had learned that love was stronger than secrets, stronger than shame, stronger than fear itself. But in his prison cell, Victor Sterling watched the clock tick toward midnight and smiled, because he had one last secret, one that would test their love more than anything that had come before. The morning headlines hit like a bomb. Sterling CEO confesses to uncle's death. Nathaniel's face was splashed across every news channel, alongside old photos of Thomas Sterling's boating accident. But Victor's attempt to destroy his brother had backfired. As the full story emerged, about Thomas arranging the death of Nathaniel's parents, about the mob connections, about everything, public sympathy swung firmly in Nathaniel's direction. The DA's office has declined to press charges, Sarah Chen announced, walking into the safe house's living room. They're calling it justified self-defense. Camilla hugged Nathaniel, feeling the tension leave his body. But their relief was short-lived. Unfortunately, Sarah continued, that's not our only problem. Victor's demanding to see you, Nathaniel. Says he has one last secret that will destroy everything you love. It's a trap, Camilla said immediately. Of course it is, Nathaniel agreed. But we need to end this. I'm going. We're going, Camilla corrected. No more facing things alone, remember? The prison visiting room was cold and grey. Victor sat waiting for them, still managing to look smug in his orange jumpsuit. The happy couple, he sneered. Ready for my wedding gift? Just say what you came to say, Nathaniel snapped. Victor pulled out an old photograph and slid it across the table. It showed a much younger Thomas Sterling with a beautiful woman. Meet Anna Rivera, Victor said, watching Camilla's face. Though you might know her better as Camilla Rivera Sr., your mother's sister. Camilla felt the room spin. What? Oh yes, Victor continued, clearly enjoying himself. Your beloved aunt was Thomas Sterling's mistress. She died in a car accident 20 years ago, or at least that's what everyone was told. Stop it, Nathaniel warned, seeing the color drain from Camilla's face. But the truth, Victor pressed, is that our dear uncle killed her when she threatened to expose his crimes, just like he later killed your parents, brother. And do you know who helped him cover it up? Who helped hide the body? He paused dramatically. Your father, Martin. Rivera, you're lying, Camilla whispered. Am I? Ask your mother about her sister Camilla. Ask her why she really named you after her. Ask her why your father really started investigating Thomas. It wasn't about the stolen money, it was about revenge. Guards rushed in as Nathaniel lunged across the table at his brother. They pulled him back as Victor laughed. How does it feel, he called after them as they left, knowing your love story is built on murder and revenge? Back at the safe house, Camilla sat in stunned silence while Nathaniel paced. We need to talk to your mother, he finally said. Maria was brought to the safe house under FBI protection. When Camilla showed her the photograph, she broke down crying. I'm so sorry, Mika, she sobbed. I wanted to protect you from all this ugliness. So it's true? Camilla asked. About Aunt Camilla and Thomas Sterling? Maria nodded slowly. Your aunt was young and foolish. She fell in love with Thomas, believed his promises to leave his wife. When she found out about his criminal activities, she threatened to go to the police, then she disappeared. And my father, did he help cover up her murder? No, mi amor. He spent years trying to prove Thomas killed her. That's why he took the job at the bank, to get close to Thomas, to find evidence. When he finally did, Thomas killed him too. Nathaniel asked quietly. But Maria shook her head. Your father died of cancer, Camilla. That part was true. But before he died, he mailed all his evidence about Camilla's murder to the FBI. That's what started their investigation into Thomas. That's why Thomas arranged the accident that killed Nathaniel's parents. He thought they were the ones who had turned him in. Camilla looked at Nathaniel, seeing the weight of all these connected tragedies in his eyes. Our families have been tangled in pain for so long, she said softly. Then let's end it, he replied. Let's be the ones who choose love over revenge. Suddenly, alarms blared through the safe house. FBI agents rushed in. Victor's escaped, Sarah announced breathlessly. And he's not alone. We intercepted communications. The whole mob is coming. This is their last chance to silence everyone who knows their secrets. As if on cue, gunfire erupted outside. Windows shattered as armed men stormed the house from all directions. In the chaos that followed, Camilla lost track of Nathaniel. She heard shooting, shouting, the thud of footsteps. Then Victor's voice. Did you really think I'd let you have a happy ending? She turned to see him holding a gun to Nathaniel's head. You took everything from me, Victor snarled. Now I'm taking everything from you. But he'd forgotten about Maria. With strength no one knew she had left, she rammed her wheelchair into Victor's legs. The gun went flying. Nathaniel tackled his brother as FBI agents swarmed in. This time there would be no escape for Victor Sterling. Hours later, as the sun rose over the safe house, now secured by what seemed like half the FBI, Camilla and Nathaniel stood in the garden. Our families were destroyed by secrets and lies, she said. Maybe that's why we found each other, to heal those old wounds. To choose a different path, Nathaniel agreed. To build something new from all that pain. 6 months later, they were married in the garden of Joe's diner. Betty cried through the whole ceremony. Maria, now fully recovered, danced at the reception. Even Mr. Johnson from the bank came, bringing the old safety deposit box as a symbol of secrets finally brought to light. Sterling Industries flourished under Nathaniel's more compassionate leadership, with Sarah Chen as his trusted partner. The company established a foundation in Thomas's victims' names, helping families affected by corporate crime. Victor Sterling served his sentence in maximum security, his power and connections finally broken. The mob organization was dismantled, their decades of crimes exposed, and in a small house just outside the city, not as grand as Nathaniel's mansion but filled with much more love, Camilla and Nathaniel built their new life. She kept working at the diner 3 days a week, not because she had to, but because those people were her family too. He learned to drink coffee that wasn't imported from Italy and found he actually preferred it. Every evening they sat on their porch, holding hands and watching the sunset. And if anyone driving by looked closely, they'd see two people who had discovered the greatest truth of all. That love, real love, doesn't erase the past. It gives you the strength to build a better future. I love you, Nathaniel would say each night, still amazed that he could say those words so easily now. I love you too, Camilla would reply, her heart full of gratitude for the strange twist of fate that had led her to his door that desperate day. And in the end, isn't that what every great love story is about? Not the dramatic moments or the grand gestures, but the simple choice to keep loving, keep fighting, keep believing in each other no matter what life throws your way. The end.